Hello, everybody. Yes, it is time for another edition of Truth, Justice, and the NBA. This is the Western Conference Weekend Edition as we are now into the second weekend of the NBA playoffs. By the way, check out my Eastern Conference edition on the previous show right here on youtube.com/TheOUCenter56. Talking about Golden State and New Orleans, this series could be over on Saturday evening, April 25th. As game number 3, just a couple of nights ago, it looked like the Pelicans had it in the bag. But if you've watched the NBA even for a limited amount of time, unlike college, unlike high school, a 20-point lead, even with 1 quarter to go and being the home team, is never enough, especially in the playoffs, and especially if it's against the best team in the NBA, which has been Golden State all year long. Golden State didn't necessarily just shoot the lights out in that fourth quarter. However, when you can get offensive rebounds and get those second chance opportunities while the other team may not be playing at that same level that got them that 20-point lead, you can erase the lead just like that. And, give Golden State credit for clawing their way back after, not playing their brand of basketball in the first 3 quarters and the 3 in the final seconds by Stephen Curry, which I don't know if you heard, but yesterday the NBA said that should have been a foul against Curry, or on New Orleans, but against Curry. In other words, it should have been a 4-point play opportunity. Could you imagine if Curry had missed that shot and the NBA had said that? Yeah, it would have been a New Orleans win, and 2-1 obviously is a lot different scenario than 3-0. 3-0 for New Orleans right now. They got nothing to lose. It's a team of the future if they can keep what they have together and maybe get one other player through the draft or through a trade that's going to bring them to that next level. But for right now, it's a good team, just not on the level of Golden State and not as many weapons. Again, Klay Thompson was clutch. And then again, you look at Draymond Green. He got better as the game went. But it was Stephen Curry, 40 points, 7 3-pointers. It wasn't a great shooting night because he did take a lot of shots, but the shots he made in the end mattered, and Golden State ends up surviving, and it was a comeback for the ages. They won the game. So Saturday night, again, from Noah, an opportunity for Golden State to close out that series. Now, of course, we already previewed games 1 and 2 on a previous Western Conference edition. But we haven't had a chance to talk about games 2 and 3 in the Houston-Dallas series. And, you talk about a slugfest in game number 2, at the Toyota Center, where it looked like, maybe Dallas was stealing some momentum. Remember, Rajon Rondo did not play in the second half. He hasn't been 100%, but then again, he hasn't been 100% mentally right either, especially with Coach Rick Carlisle. So you wonder if he's ever going to play for the Dallas Mavericks again. Becomes an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season, and if he does play for Dallas, they would have to have a change of heart, and no question will be a change of pocketbook because he won't be, making that money that he has been making throughout the seasons. He might be on the downside of his career. Plus the public relations part between he and Carlisle, a.k.a. a shouting match, in the hallway after a particular game, might tell you that many teams might be scared to take him, and he just isn't as good as he used to be. Getting back, though, to game number 2, Dallas had a 3-point lead with about 10 minutes to go. Monte Ellis was playing good, and you think, okay, maybe they can steal one in Houston. No. That's when Houston went on a run of about 11-0. That's right, Dirk Nowitzki could not make a bucket to save his life, and you don't say that too often for the future first ballot Hall of Famer. It just wasn't going right for him, and Houston took a 3-point deficit and made it into a double-digit win, game 2 earlier in the week. And then yesterday, the highest-scoring playoff regulation game, again without overtime, a combined 258 points in this one. In fact, Dallas had over 70 at halftime. Monte Ellis was Mr. Clutch, especially in that second quarter early on. And Dallas looked like had a healthy lead. Again, they scored over 70. And the biggest reason Houston, even though they're doing good things offensively, they weren't getting back to the other end of the court in time. They just weren't able to finish those plays defensively. And that allowed Dallas some transition buckets. And in the second half, I thought Coach McHale and company did a pretty good job. But it was James Harden's night, 42 points. And in terms of rebounding, well over 20 rebounds for, quote, Superman, end of quote. Dwight Howard didn't do much to DH as far as points, but rebounding, he was pivotal. And you could see that Houston with more rebounding power. And remember, going back to game 2, Josh Smith, it didn't work out for him in Atlanta, and it really did not work out for him in Detroit. He didn't even last half a season earlier this year in Motown. and Dallas picks him up. And Josh Smith doesn't have to be a great scorer. He doesn't have to be a great rebounder, although he's helped in the board department. How about assist? And that's when a guy like Dwight Howard or Harden can get those open looks and bury you. Houston's been a scoring machine these first 3 games, up 3 games to none. And the thing I like the best about Harden in this particular game, when Dallas had cut it to 1 after Nowitzki made all 3 of those free throws, Harden made a difficult bucket over the outstretched hands of Tyson Chandler, got the nice roll, and that gave him a little bit of a cushion, even though Dallas had a chance to tie it in the end and it didn't work out. So Houston up 3 games to none. And again, opportunity, I believe Sunday or Monday, I think it's Sunday, to close out that series from Dallas. And again, I don't think that Rondo will be back next year for the Mavericks. Talking about Portland and Memphis, we're going to talk about game number 2. And for Portland, hey, the first 2.5 minutes showed promise, especially for LaMarcus Aldridge, which stat-wise ended up with a nice game, point-wise and rebound-wise. I mean, stat-wise, he's been pretty much it for the Trailblazers. And then the next 21.5 minutes, Portland's game went nowhere, scoring less than 30 during that stretch. And for the second straight time, it's the same thing. Memphis is winning this series with their half-court, stingy offense, and they have clamped down on Damian Lillard, who, has a good game just against just about everybody. He's an all-star, and the best is yet to come for Lillard. But you can tell that even though he's not 100%, the guard play of Mike Conley has been outstanding. You add Courtney Lee to the mix, and then Udro, who had double digits in points again. Not as many in this game as he did in game 1, but then again, he played a limited amount of minutes. So Conley, you can tell that even though he's not 100%, when in there, he could still be effective. Gasol and Randall did not have good shooting games for the Grizzlies. It didn't matter, though. They were effective on the boards. And Aldridge, yeah, he did score a lot of points, but he took an excessive amount of shots. I don't blame him for that necessarily, because he's trying to get this team going in the right direction. And the rumors I've heard about Aldridge, and again, rumors are rumors, so, don't take me to the task on this, but you might have heard the same thing. Aldridge is not happy in Portland, okay? Maybe they're not building enough around him. Maybe it's because of the fact that other than Aflalo, they do not have the most productive bench, even though I know Blake at times has his moments, okay? In defense, Portland has had a wealth of injuries. So you can call them the MASH unit, but in this case, I'm going to call them MIA, as in missing in action, especially Damian Lillard. On Saturday night, Game 3 from Portland, if the Blazers are to get back in this series, it's got to be Blazer basketball. You got to get at least 100 points. You got to rebound, and you got to show everybody that, despite the injuries, you can still do it. I mean, look at San Antonio. Tony Parker, he's got that Achilles. It doesn't matter. Patty Mills can step up and do the job. And speaking of the Spurs, got to talk about games 2 and 3 as we wrap up the Western Conference part of Truth, Justice, in the NBA. Game number 2 was a classic, an absolute classic, and you knew the Spurs were going to come back after their most important players that we've seen over the years, Danny Green, Tim Duncan, as well as Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili, all shot like crap in game number 1. Game number 2, even though Parker didn't have a terrific game, and again, the Achilles could be part of it, Patty Mills stepped in and did a fine job. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But first, the play of Tim Duncan, he's like a fine wine, gets better with age, had a 28-point game, and you might remember in overtime, with the game tied, hit that clutch 14-foot shot off balance, falling to the floor, and had very little arc on the shot. And not the first time we've seen Duncan do something like that. The guy keeps in terrific shape. And by the way, I'm not a Spurs fan at all. I'm really not, but I do respect the way they play. It's team basketball from the starters to the bench. They go about 9 or 10 deep, and they play a system of being patient and getting players involved. And Duncan, again, continues to show why he's the best power forward to ever play the game, in my opinion. The Spurs, though, they had gotten it by 10 with 6 minutes to go, and it got interesting because Popovich, not the first time he's done this against the Clippers this year. It was a hack-a-shack on DeAndre Jordan, more like hack-a-DeAndre. DeAndre Jordan's one of the worst free throw shooters in the league, and it pretty much showed he was 6 of 17 on the night. At one stretch, though, did make 3 in a row. So for me, for Jordan, It's mental, okay? He doesn't have to shoot 80% from the free throw line to be effective, but try to get 60 or 65. Don't make it to where until the NBA, if and when they decide to change the rule on fouling somebody intentionally over and over again, don't become that easy target. I have no problem with what the Spurs did. Yeah, it's ugly basketball, and in a way, it really did, slow the Spurs down. After all, the Spurs didn't score over a 4-minute stretch from the 6 to the 2-minute mark at the end of the game, so they kind of hurt themselves because the Clippers had a chance to set up their defense rather than transition buckets, which missed free throws. When the Clippers themselves don't think Jordan's going to make those free throws, they can get back and set up, and therefore that really kind of screwed things up. But I have no problem with what Popovich did, because if you have a major weakness, attack it. I don't care if it looks bad on TV. I don't care if you're going to get ridiculed by it. If it's within the rules, I see no problem in doing it. DeAndre Jordan, work on your free throws. You know you're a bad free throw shooter. Get a specialist, get a psychiatrist, do something, because otherwise, until they change the rule, until they modify it, hey, you're going to keep getting this treatment, and you're going to keep putting your team in a bad position. And the Clippers needed every point they can get. I know they were able to tie the game and eventually take a 2-point lead down the stretch, but imagine if Jordan could have hit, better than 6 of 17. And, he's not the only one. Matt Barnes has been awful, dog awful, both from the field and the free throw line. Game 2 and 3 are examples of that. In game 1, probably a little bit better, but then again, 2 and 3, when they needed every starter to be the maximum, hey, he's a veteran player. He's been around. He's much better than what he's showing. But the Clippers up 2 in game 2, late, 11 seconds to go, and the ball squirts out of Blake Griffin's hands. It slips like butter, and they foul Patty Mills when he's driving. Mills makes both free throws. Biggest difference in this game was free throw shooting in overtime. And at the end of regulation, Spurs hit their free throws, and the Clippers did not. They missed 19 free throws for the game, and that bit them right there like a bee. And then game 3, you could tell the hangover that Blake Griffin had when he was ineffective in overtime. He wasn't very effective in this game either. And neither was Chris Paul. His shooting went straight south. And it was Kawhi Leonard, who has been the consistency in games 1, 2, and 3, and in game 3 especially, after the Spurs, who had a manageable lead at halftime, took it from a manageable lead to just blowing the Clippers off of the AT&T Center floor with an insurmountable lead and embarrassing the LA Clippers, holding them to 73 points and well under 35% shooting, and even lower than that from three-point range. It was a game in which Doc Rivers said it best at the end of the game. The Clippers just simply, got their butts kicked, end of quote. We're going to see how the Clippers, respond over the weekend. Game number 4, if they lose this one, they're done. They're history. They've got to get more overall production from the marquee players, from Blake and from Paul. And for Chris Paul, he's one of the best, point guards we've seen in a while. He'll be in the Hall of Fame one day, but he's never, ever played in the NBA Finals. Heck, he's never even played in a conference championship. That's right, he's never gotten past the second round of the playoffs. And that's going to be something that hangs over his head like an ugly cloud, okay? He's got to be able to guide his team, kind of like what Kawhi Leonard's doing right now in games 1, 2, and 3. He's proven the Defensive Player of the Year is that Leonard is not just a defensive player, but he's an offensive weapon as well. So Spurs up 2-1. We'll see how game 4 pans out. Speaking of panning out, that does wrap it up for this edition of the Truth, Justice, in the NBA. My next show, Eastern Conference, we'll talk about game number 3 between the Hawks and the Nets, and also game 4 between Chicago and Milwaukee. We'll find out if the Bulls, and as I'm looking at the screen right now, 1-point Milwaukee lead, it's now tied between the Bulls and the Bucks in the final seconds of the fourth quarter. Milwaukee trying to stay alive. The Bulls, of course, trying to move on and have a potential date with Cleveland. The Cavaliers, we'll talk about their series against the Celtics. And Toronto and Washington. Wizards got a shot at sending Toronto back north of the border, but for good for the remainder of the playoffs. Wizards up 3-0. That does it. We will talk more basketball on the next edition of Truth, Justice, in the NBA. We'll do it Eastern Conference style next time. So long, everyone.